Hello and welcome back to the Jo's Art History podcast, a podcast which celebrates all things art historical. With me, art historian Jo McLaughlin. I'm really excited for today's episode. I'm joined by the brilliant Brian Konstantinou, aka Konsto, which is how I refer to him throughout the episode, who is a Glasgow-based photographer. So very excited, another Scottish person on the podcast. In today's episode, Brian and I have a discussion around the question, is photography an art form? Which takes us in all sorts of directions, as you can imagine. We discuss his work, the problem with everyone having a camera on their phone, and how much the art form of photography has been completely undervalued and appreciated throughout art history. This was a really brilliant conversation, just really around the art of photography. We don't really get into anything crazy art historical here, but a lot of important questions and a lot of very aha moments, which is always great. There's a lot of food for thought in this episode, so I just want to thank Konsto before you hear the episode one more time. We recorded this back in March or April of 2021. So it's been a long time sitting in my vault, waiting for me to edit and send it out into the world. And I've loved listening back to our conversation. And it's really got me thinking again about some brilliant artists and photographers that I will be diving into in a bit more detail, hopefully in later series, both in the podcast and via my Instagram as well. So all that's left for you to do is sit back and relax as Konsto and I discuss, is photography an art form? Enjoy. So I think the first sort of question, the obvious question to ask you is, did you always know that you wanted to work in photography? Growing up in Clydebank, were you told you could be a photographer? Was this something at school that you came across?
I've got a wee story because I do talks. I've been like at the college and stuff in the talk, and you know, I'm like one of these guys that had my head in the clouds sort of thing, and obviously I didn't envision the stuff that I'd photographed now, what I really wanted to do initially, because I wanted to do, like, I was into hip hop when I was young, and I wanted to do like album covers and shoot music and, you know, be on film sets. Obviously it's not quite worked out that way, but I love what I do, and just my kind of background, I was kind of talked out at by some people, and it has been a hard thing to do as well, but I'm definitely glad I've done it.
And you went to train in photography though.
I did, because I had lots of, like, I was just working dead end jobs. Like, I'd messed about, which I have done for most of my life, so I haven't got a real solid education. I've got high school stuff, and I was just working dead end kind of manual jobs. And then I was like 23, and I'm like, you know what? I did realise I was young, and I'm like, it's now or never. Do something silly at college. Don't go and do like what everybody else thinks you should do, and just have one pop and give myself a certain amount of time to get work. And I kind of just, it bled into it, and I just started to get it and just get deeper and deeper. And I'm like, it actually did work. And I've been doing it now for like 17 years or something. So,
which is amazing.
Well, not the heights, but again, I've been blessed to see stuff like, you know, even like I'm a Celtic supporter, but that's why I put in that Ant Middleton thing, because I shot for Rangers, which I get a lot of jip from people, the rivalry, you know, people kind of somewhat falling out with me, people that are very confused, all the messages, what are you doing working with them? And I'm pointing out, like, I'm getting to meet guys like that. Somebody I didn't know who really inspired me, the way he was with people, how smart he was, how fit, everything, how quick he is on his feet.
Yeah, so, and that's it. Like, when you sent me your images, because you've sent me like 6 or 7, that was the one that really sort of drew me in, because you've just captured his character beautifully.
Yeah.
And you didn't give me any background. And this is something that I really enjoy about photography, is it's one of these things very much like paintings and sculpture.
What you take from it. It's like everybody sees it different ways. What you thought was interesting could be somebody going, what the hell's Konsto doing taking pictures for them? You know, so it's actually from happiness to hatred. And just a few things, like I've been on the TV with it and how it was very positive, but some people seen that as a very negative thing. And I'll probably actually go back into the art sort of thing, actually, to be fair, because what it evokes, it's one picture, but it can create so many different reactions just on the viewer and how they interpret things.
It's really funny. So when you sent me this, it was his amazing sort of facial features, and he's just sort of like mid laughing, about to sort of clap his hands, and I was like, oh my gosh, this photo is incredible. And then when I looked again, I was like, so obviously Ant was the thing that drew me in, and then I was like, what? Where is he?
He's
And
actually
then I
in a
started.
very sacred place, to be fair, and
Oh,
amongst
okay.
the training facility, because they've got a kit man who's kind of known for being a very, very staunch Rangers supporter. So you either love him or hate this guy, and he's like do-faced, and he's get like uh, he's just a bit of a, what's the word? Like a character, but also just one of these guys that we get brought into a place that not many people are allowed in, and he's laughing at seeing cuttings and stuff, and Jimmy Bell's face is tripping him, but he's cracking dry jokes and stuff. So that's why they really enjoyed it, because it's and people like, not everybody gets this welcome and stuff. Most people get told to beat it, sort of stuff. So
Mm,
that's why we're getting it. And then with the thing with photography, I like capturing the moments. That's the big thing for me, is candid shots, and that tends to be people's favourites. Not the ones I set up, the ones that I'm doing the fly in the wall kind of documentary thing. Because I was just what do you call, shadowing them while we were getting taken through and meeting Stevie G, and he was getting taught around, and that guy was just, it was interesting to see how he interacted with people, and what an amazing guy. Never heard of him before that, and then people, I get so many messages, that's my favourite show, I didn't know he was a bloody Rangers reporter, just all the usual stuff. So yeah, it's cool stuff.
yeah, I mean, it is amazing. And I think this is a great example of when people ask, is, because we spoke before we sort of press record about, there's this whole debate, is photography an art form? And I think when you can capture something like this, and I can feel this guy's excitement, and I can feel like there's a connection there, and I don't know, it sparks something in me. For me, that's art. I don't know, where do you stand on the whole sort of
It's
photography?
just
Is
it's a
photography
hard
art?
thing, because like photography can be just a record, it can basically be like a textbook, instruction manual, if you like, just showing stuff for what
Mm,
it is. But when you start, like, what's my photography is when you start conveying something, like, and thinking about what you want to actually do, not just point the camera and press a button, because that's not art. You don't, if you paint something and you want to kind of get your feelings across, like somebody throwing paint against the wall is art. If they're doing it like, this is what, my angst. And sometimes obviously people go, oh, that abstract stuff is very easy and stuff. And sometimes it does feel that way. But I think if you take something and put your spin on it to try and convey what you feel about something, I feel that's art. That's just, what's the difference between
mm.
hitting a stick off a saucepan? That can be a song, or that can be an annoying kid making a noise. It depends on your your technical ability, your thoughts, your study and things. And there's so many things that say is an unmade bed art. You know, it's
Mm.
what is it? There's no rights or wrongs basically. And you know what? For somebody to say no, I wouldn't even really be angry. It's just I think it definitely is. And what I told you as well, the biggest one was the one of the most prestigious art schools in Britain hire a fine arts photographer to teach fine art
Yeah.
for a lot of money. So obviously, people who are a wee bit more in the know than me agree. So there you go.
Well, that's it. And it's so funny because because obviously I've been on, you've got a podcast as well, just to give everyone to sort of set the scene a little
Yep.
bit. And we've done a bit of like a podcast swap. So I've come on yours. Yours is called Konsto's Convos,
Yep.
and I was like, please come on mine. And when you said that when you agreed to come on mine, it's really got me thinking about. So my first thought was, I don't know any photographers, and then I thought of people like Cindy Sherman. And then for the whole week, Konsto, all I've done is be like, oh my gosh, they also use photography. They also use photography. And I've ended up, like, I've written a list of all the people that I could think of just off the top of my head, not um, not sort of searching for it or like Googling it, of people that I think, oh my gosh, yeah, like they use photography as in their art form.
There's a lot of mixed media with photography. A lot of photographers work with artists as well. There was we spoke in one of our podcasts that there's a well-known. He's more of a music photographer, but he does a lot of the LA Chicano culture photography, and he's friends with a tattoo artist, and they work together and they do multimedia stuff, and he covers things. The Beastie Boys had a photographer that they used to work with who just recently passed away, actually, and they called him would that be the fourth Beastie Boy, and he photographed their journey, but he also worked with graffiti artists that would write over the pictures and stuff. So a lot of collaborations and stuff. So it's just one of the things you delve in deeper, and a lot of photographers use photographs to start with their paintings, don't they?
Well, that's it. And if I think of somebody like George Seurat, who is like a very famous post-impressionist, when he's the one that does the pointillism, all the tiny dots that when you stand really close to it, you can't see it, but when you step back, you can.
Yep.
And that's essentially what photography is. It's all these sort of
the grain.
Yeah, that's it. And so it's been really, really interesting just to sort of, like, I found this so intriguing just to sort of dive down the rabbit hole of the debate of, is photography art? And then it's got me thinking about, I completely agree with you. I think it is. And you have people like, Elton John, for example, was a very, very famous person who has a huge photography collection.
Right, okay.
And a few years ago at Tate, he exhibited, I think it was like a third of what he owns. He's been collecting photography for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a really important way of documenting things.
Not just that.
And like you said,
as even you said, it's a base as well, because you've got guys like Stanley Kubrick and Dennis Hopper who were photographers before they made movies. And I seen his through in Edinburgh, Stanley Kubrick, and he used to work stuff, and he started off as he shot for newspapers and stuff, but he get very drawn into the compositions and the artistic forms which transformed, cinema with the stuff that he done. And that's what he says, that's where he get his grounding on lighting. And even you think about that, it's like, what medium do you use? You said grain, so some guys still use film. I can use digital. What kind of brand of camera you use and lenses will give different looks. So you're putting thoughts. We're not just putting a mobile phone up and taking a picture of a sunset. These people are really thinking about the time of day, the color, the medium they're going to do it, what sort of equipment, just so many things. So it's I think it's a no-brainer, but we maybe have to bring somebody else on. We can fight to the death.
Fight to the death is photography and art form. Exactly. But I agree with you. And also for me as an art historian and a curator, more importantly, it's not just thinking about what equipment they're going to use and how they're going to expose it, and it's the scenes as well. I've spoken to a few photographers actually. One, funnily enough, who came on to talk about Tracy Emin's Unmade Bed. Her name's Kerry Curl, and she really loves curating and working and setting up the scenes in which she's going to shoot her models in. And that's something that a few years ago, I say a few years ago, it was actually last year. It's just that 2020 was 4,000 years long. I went to see, do you know the sort of fashion photographer, Tim Walker?
No, I've never heard of him.
So he had an exhibition on at the V&A, and he does all these very sort of experimental fashion photography shots. And I was sort of like, is this going to be any good? And I was like, I'll go along, because I always think you should go and see these things before you make up your mind.
Absolutely.
And it's one of the best exhibitions I've ever been to, but it just really made me think about all the things that go on behind the scenes. It's kind of like, it's exactly the same as looking at an artwork or coming into a gallery exhibition. Like, you just see the finished product. You don't see the sort of the thought process, the conversations.
That's like a button press. So even looking at these pictures and like Annie Leibovitz and all these people, do you know how long it takes to actually set it up? And the actual action of pressing the buttons, like literally a fraction of a second. So that doesn't mean it. That's what most people think, but it's all the thought that goes into it, and getting everything right before you get it. So it's like you're creating stuff. You're not just. I think that's the problem. Is people think photography is like you can go a beautiful sunset, take a picture, and it's a nice picture, and that's art. That's probably not art. Actually, it's more like the thought of really getting into nitty gritty, the planning, what you want to convey to people, because I think that's the problem with photographers. People just think if you see something cool, point your camera at it and take a picture, you're a photographer, or that could be art. But that's not really the case, I don't think, because there's not the thought that's going into it. And if you look at this guy's stuff, I'm just having a look at Tim's stuff here. It's very out there, and it looks as if there's a ton of work going on there. And that was probably multimedia, because that girl's face there is all painted. So, and yeah, there's a lot of elements in that. So, yeah.
I mean, I found it was an amazing exhibition, and anyone that's interested, it was called I think it was Tim Walker Wonderland, and I'll leave a link to the V&A show, because they've got a really lovely video about it as well, and I'll leave that in the show notes. But it's really funny. So I've got a question for you. I was watching, in preparation for talking to you, I was watching a TED talk on the history of photography, and it was this American photographer came on, and he said, what's really interesting is when people will approach me when I have my camera, and they'll look at my camera, and it's a big, expensive piece of kit, and they go, "Oh my gosh, that must be such an expensive camera. It must take really good photos."
Yeah. Well, that's the one that's always a joke, and it gets a bit cliche, but it was somebody that says, "Do you go for a lovely meal, and do you go up to the chef after it and say, you must have a really expensive oven?" It's, I always laugh. On a personal level, I'm always like, well, if I gave you my camera, could you do it? It's actually these harder cameras that are thingies, they actually take much more expertise or knowledge or technical know-how to get a photograph out of it. If somebody gives you a phone, how many times somebody's like, take a picture of, me with these people, and that it's you're just basically pressing a button after you open the app. But these technical cameras are, it takes a bit of, as I say, know-how to get the best out of it. And when people say that, it's just like anything. Not till you know something can you really comment on a lot of stuff. And that, I get that all the time. It's like, oh, that must take really good pictures, your camera. And it's people being people, aren't they? They just say these sort of things. If you're getting expensive pair of golf clubs, can you play golf good?
Well, that's it. And it's so funny. Like when he said it, it was like a penny drop moment for me. I was like, oh my God, I've never thought of it like that. And I probably, because I work with photographers quite a lot in the gallery with what I do. And I've probably, out of sheer ignorance, said, because their kit's incredible, oh my God, this must take amazing images. And I was like, oh my God. But it's, like you said, it's people being people, it's commenting, it's not thinking about it. But it's also...
How many times you just open your mouth and let your belly rumble, or you see something cool and you say these things. And in a certain aspect, they're kind of right as well, because these cameras are capable of so much, the size of the sensors, if they get good glass, you just get a real crisp look. But again, it's who's using these tools.
Well, that's it. And do you feel like, as a photographer, because now the technology on everyone's phones is advancing what appears to be weekly, there seems to be this thing where everyone seems to think they're a photographer? I certainly wouldn't think I'm one. I am terrible at taking photos.
Do. I think it's a fun thing, isn't it? Back in the day when you used to shoot with film, you didn't know what you were getting, so it was very nervy. And if you had something that you really needed to get photographs of, the pressure was on. Now we can look, and how many times, I don't like how I look in that one, do it again. These selfies, and it's fine. And I know people love it. And just how my work's changed because of it is I've lost a lot of work, certain types of work, because more people will get access to phones. I tend to photograph the stuff that's a bit harder, maybe products that are clear, shiny, reflections and stuff that most people go, I can't really take a picture of that without me being in it and things. So, or people who know that there's people that just have got good taste, or they know their stuff needs to look good, when you're trying to separate yourself from the pack. So a lot of sellers and stuff know that good photographs of their products will help create a feeling about, because when you sell stuff, it's like, they get all these buzzwords, and it's like you're creating a story, you want to create romanticism and stuff. So that's when you kind of need to know what you're doing. You can't really do that with phone. But some people are really good with these things. You know, there's a lot of really good photographers on Instagram using the phones, but it's just one of these things. It has changed stuff massively, because I even know a lot of photographers that just use their phones because it's easier to take a picture and, you know, edit it quickly and then forward it on to somebody, or have it on your Facebook within a minute of taking it.
So that's something that I was wondering, because I watched the video on your website that's where you sort of like introduce yourself, and in the video you're like, you said this really beautiful thing where you were like, I started photography when film was king.
Yeah, I loved it. Black and white film was the thing, and it was just me and my friend actually, who went to college with, he is the photographer at Rangers, their lead photographer, he's got me work there. We go cycling still, we talk about stuff, and we were both heavy into black and white film. We kind of resisted digital because it was creeping in at college, and we were both like, nah, I just can't see it. But to be fair, digital was very in its infancy, so the quality in that was quite pants and very expensive. But we'd been getting into like, oh man, this is going to open up a whole new world. So we both get excited about it. But there was something special about being in that dark room and, you know, developing it with the chemicals and seeing these latent images kind of appear. It was actually amazing. It's a shame it became so expensive and time consuming, and digital just wiped it away.
Do you feel like photography's lost something in that? Because I suppose an art form for a lot of people have this very sort of bohemian idea of an artist, that they're in their studio, they're painting at their easel, they're chipping away at a block of marble. With photography, you know, there's a physical element that's been taken there,
tangible, and, you know, things getting your hands on, and, you know, just at the mercy of some things as well. But, you know, I'm sure you know plenty of artists that create stuff digitally as well, you know, with pens and stuff.
Yeah.
And I've seen somebody do something in Procreate, I think it's called, an app, and they were using this pen, and the stuff they were doing, it was just, it was so amazing. You know, like a time lapse, you know, sped up. And I'm like, well, you're going to argue that that's not art? You know, it was fantastic. It's just our mediums change. You know, before we used to use, I guess, I don't know how they got the pigments and the colour when they were painting the caves. Then we got oil, you know, even acrylics came in. Look, spray painting, you know, in a can. That became an art. So just the mediums and the tools we use just change. And you always get your purists that stick to the things, and it makes sense for them because that's their thing. So you shoot down the things that you are not. But, you know, you just, as you get older, you kind of realise there's different ways of doing things, and some people get stuck with it, some people move, or some people embrace both.
Yeah. What I really like about your work, though, is the range that you've sent me. It's talking about sort of the Puritans and the people that are, you know, they have their sort of subject and they stick to it, because there is this sort of snobbery within the photography industry as well. When I was like preparing for this podcast, there was a lot of, when I was, you know, listening to different photographers talk, some of them would be like, I only do sort of black and white portraits. There's no way in hell I'll shoot your wedding. And there's like this snobbery of, I don't know, trying to wear too many caps.
You know what? I agree with that to some extent, because I do think that if you concentrate on something, you'll be so good at it. You know, if you focus your effort on something, you can do amazing things. I go back, and I'm not this working class hero type guy, but most of the reasons why I've done a broad range of stuff is because people paid me to do things. Some things is because I love doing. Some things is, I do it for money. And I always tell people, for as much as I love doing weddings, with meeting new people, traveling to different countries, seeing beautiful places that I would have never have seen before, you know, just in the Isles of Scotland, going to New York, you know, just the amount of cool people I've met. But I never set out to be a wedding photographer, you know, just because I was at college and then somebody says, you want to photograph this person's wedding? I'm like, no, really. And they'll give you £300. I'm like, when do I start? It was just money. It's just the way things take me, you know, like, and, you know, as a younger guy, like in football, I would have, like, somebody says, would you work for Rangers? You're probably like, nah, no way. But as you get older and you're like, I've got bills to pay and stuff, and then you get even wiser and you know that you can rub shoulders and speak and be there with some fantastic athletes, people like Aunt Middleton that are just outliers, and just when would I ever get that? I could have been working in a factory. That's why I was working in factories. I was doing a delivery driver's mate and things. Am I going to meet all these people and get to see this stuff if I never had the photography? So it's gave me so much, but it also means that I've had to do a lot of things probably I wouldn't have chose to photograph. I wanted to be a music photographer. Flirted with that a wee bit, and then obviously the amateur market and better photographers than me kind of filled it. So just one of those things. Adapt and move on.
Well, that's it. And I also think it doesn't matter if one part of your practice it doesn't really light a fire under you. Everyone kind of needs their bread and butter thing. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people that have like portfolio careers where they've got like 6 or 7 things going on. And like you said, there's opportunity in these as well. You get to, as a wedding photographer, you must see the best in people on a really exciting day when everyone's really happy.
The emotions are running. You've experienced, so you get to control things a wee bit. You can be a bit of a showman if you prefer. I like keeping people calm by talking shit and cracking jokes and making people feel good when they're maybe nervous and things. They're dressed up good. I've got beautiful backdrops. I've been in medieval castles. I've been all over the place. It's like it's hard not to take a good picture of some of these. You meet some just beautiful people. Like again, there's people that work every day. They travel in the same train. They travel, the same walk. They commute, everything the same, and they work with the same people that they basically, you don't like everybody in your work, but you're stuck with them for decades. I've traveled and met so many strange and wonderful people. People like really. I think that's why when people get well-rounded, with travel and stuff, you're maybe not as bigoted, or you're maybe not as quick to draw comparisons and stuff, because you meet so many people that you think, well, they kind of don't go against, they go against cliches, or just fantastic people out there. Some amazing people that you might meet them in your work, in the factory. There's amazing people in factories, but the sameness that I kind of was always a bit scared of. I like the wee bit of excitement, a wee bit of knot in my stomach. Like, I wonder how it's going to be today. The weather, what's going to be like? What's this place like? Who am I going to meet? And people are super interesting. That's why I go back and say I started the podcast, because of all these people that I'd met, mainly through, photography.
Yeah, well, that's it. And also, like, photography is storytelling. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's a story before you capture the shot. You have to sort of, like we said, you have to sort of think about it, curate it, speak to the people, get them comfortable. And I think that speaks, I think being good with people is an art form in itself. Not everybody can like walk into a room full of people and be like, hey guys, I'm going to photograph everyone and it's going to be great. So just chill out.
That guy, and I do struggle with that. That's why I do like to be that documentarian where I'm kind of hiding in the shadows sort of stuff. But sometimes you're in that groove and you're like, hey, I'm ready to shout and thing me, but I'm not one of those guys. But that's the cool thing too, is like there's some photographers that will shoot long lens. They don't really have to deal with people. And then there's other ones which I really love, and guys saying like, seeing you're close, get closer. You can get stuff. So like even the dancing, I do receptions or events. I like getting the dance floor, I'm boogieing, I've got my camera. People forget you've got the camera, so you get wicked stuff, up close. And there's a big difference between a photograph shot in close proximity to somebody rather than being off on the fringes. They both have got different looks, but that's again how you go about your business and how the photographs you get. Sometimes I don't push myself enough, and I'm lucky I've got other guys that push me, whether it's getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning or going out late at night or getting you jobs that you didn't really want to do and stuff. So it's always down to people.
Well, there's one of your images that you've sent me, and it's called George, and it's of this guy.
Well, that one,
oh my God,
like that photograph because it made him look old, right? And the amount of people that came up to me and it was just like, oh my God, it's like a Clint Eastwood movie. And it would be funny to see how everybody interpreted that again. And most people, it was overwhelming positivity, except for the guy that I took the photograph with. But somebody had told me about this. It was a really well-known publication, Photograph magazine at the time. And they used to print off the best pictures from the people sent in. And somebody's like, we kind of got in a competition because my friend took a really cool picture of the Wicker Man Festival with the Wicker Man on fire. and he got on, and he was one of my main mentors, like getting me into stuff, and we kind of got in a friendly competition. And I sent that picture in because it was just getting really good feedback, and they kind of printed it up over 2 pages, and it was like, oh, cool, and I showed him.
Amazing.
And oh man, his opinion stopped at that. He's like, "Can I get a copy of that to give that to my girlfriend?" and all this. So he became somewhat famous in the place. That was just a fag break. I was testing out a new 50mm lens because I wanted to start getting the out of focus look and stuff. But I wanted to get the smoke. I knew about dodging and burning from my film days, and I knew I started learning to do that in Photoshop. So that was when a lot of things kind of came together. And to this day, I love that picture. So many people talk about that one. It was just a guy having a fag break.
Honestly, it's a beautiful, incredible shot. And for me, it's something that should be in a photography book. It's so powerful. And for me, I just think, who are you? Like, what are you doing?
You can
like,
have you? His face, can't you?
He just looks like such a badass, or that he just doesn't give a shit. He's just like, yeah, whatever. Else, like,
man. We could talk a wee story of him too. It's just funny, just mad random guys that you meet.
Can I ask, how do you deal with? Because, well, you know, you and I both have a podcast, and you have that common thing with podcasts where people are like, oh my God, I hate the sound of my voice. How do you edit? Do you have that with photography, and that people don't to look at themselves, or that they're very...
there, like that picture, like I wanted to bring out the lines and stuff. So probably what people think looks cool, it probably doesn't look good in you. So if I'd done that same picture, you'd be like, you could be hurt, be saying, fucking that and wrinkly, you know, and you have to remember, and I'm not one of these guys, it's like, I'm not a magician either. It's like, that's what you look like, sort of thing. So if people are self-conscious about their weight and stuff, it can be very difficult. But again, it's experience. So when it comes to weddings and stuff, I know, like, maybe don't get in too close to somebody's face. You know, sometimes you don't need to see this detail in people's faces, because these cameras can pick up your nose hairs, you know, it will show you everything. And but then again, you can make somebody look so happy and wonderful. The problem is now you're probably competing. Like, if I take one quick shot of you at a wedding or something, and for an hour or so you've been taking selfies, and you've chosen your 78th version that you like the best, it's kind of hard to compete with that as well, because you don't really know what people they don't like about themselves. You know, some people, maybe it's like, oh, I've got that wee flap of skin that hangs under my chin, but if I pull my face up and do this, the selfie, it disappears. If I put this filter on, it's gonna brighten my wee beady eyes, whatever. So you're competing different stuff. But then again, it's your experience and your tools and what you do. You kind of, people do appreciate that, and it's the moments caught. You know, that's a big one I like. Is we go back to Untitled, I just like getting these moments, and that moments usually tends to be in between moments, is what they call it. You know, because once you're kind of, it's hard to explain, but it's if you shoot 5 pictures, sometimes you go, that's it there. You know, maybe their face is a bit screwed up in that one, the eyes shut there. You just get these perfect kind of moments. Sometimes you're lucky, but you got to, as you develop and you get the tools and the quickness, because that's a big thing. Like, I've always got a camera, like quick draw sort of stuff. You're like a 6-shooter. From getting that camera down to your side, up to your eye, and get the explosion. I've missed pictures of the RZA. I met the RZA at T in the Park, but I had it on auto. And if you know anything about photography, it's it reads a mid-tone, but if you get really dark skin, it will underexpose your picture sometimes, so you need to know to compensate for different types of skin. And we were in a dark tent, and he was quite dark, and it did not come out. We had a wee moment sort of thing, you know, just to acknowledge me, and he's like giving me the nod, and I've done it to him, and I'm like, oh, I better take a picture of him. I was here photographing it, but early on in my career. So these are the things that you develop. I definitely missed my opportunity there.
I find that so interesting. Like, I never even would have thought like skin tone is something that you would have to think about, depending on if you're filling the frame, because I had the 70-200, which is it's what you'd call a zoom lens, if you like. Although a zoom lens can be wide, but this one's quite a tight, so his face kind of filled it up. So again, it fooled the camera on the auto setting. What I probably would have done, and even to be fair, now with cameras these days, you can really push the limits. Like, I could probably bring that out the shadows and get a good thing, but when you've done it nowadays,
your image would just fall apart. You know, the quality would just degrade so bad. And I still get a couple of that one, but I was just like, shit. That was a real one because again, that's the reason I got into photography. I love hip hop music and I wanted meeting these guys again. Look, photography let me meet guys like that. You know, when I'm in our time. Well, to be fair, we actually met Doris at a concert. My pal told him to get to fuck because he thought he was trying to sell tickets at a ticket hurt, and somebody tapped me phone. He's like, "Yeah, mate, that's the RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan." We're like, "Fuck."
I'm going to go back on something that you said earlier. So you were talking about how it's difficult to compete with people who have these phones in their pockets and they've taken 100 selfies. They've picked the 2 that they like and they know exactly what angles to sort of stand at and what angles and what to
I could add filtration to something and go, you calling me, you saying I'm wrinkly, or you don't do enough, and like, oh, you could they always say you could airbrush me a wee bit. So everybody knows themselves the best. It says they know that angle, they know the amount of softness, if you like, because you see these ones as well. It's like their eyes pop, it smooths their skin, they look like aliens now. So if people like that, and my friend was he's an online dating guy, so he gets photographs all the time of these girls, and he's like, you know what, big man, he says they never look as good as they do in that photograph.
It's so interesting though, but my thought there is, so obviously you, as you've said previously, you used to work with, develop the film, and I still remember the excitement that it used to, because I used to have, like when I was little, my mum and dad bought me that sort of blue Fisher Price camera, and so good. Or the one with the film where you had to take it in to get it developed and hand the sort of the spool. Is it the spool? Yeah. And you just didn't know what you were going to get. And I just think,
magic, wasn't it?
Yeah. But do you think the digital element of the fact that everyone is now so conscious and so aware that their life is documented and how easily accessed these photos are, that's made everyone more paranoid and more aware of, oh my God, I have to stand like this, or I have to hide this part of me.
The girls that are maybe in their teens, they all stand the same. Whereas they'd probably just be standing normally, up and down, but now they put their hands on their hips, they bend their knee, they've all got this same look. They pull these faces, like the pout chart.
Yeah.
All these weird things that we're kind of doing. We're very self-conscious. But then again, there's also a group of people who do not want a photograph taken at all because they know that instead of maybe a couple people seeing, put in some sort of shoebox, as it can be seen by people all over the world. People are very self-conscious. So I've had also people that get quite emotional, angry, or whatever, having the thought of you taking the picture. So there's so many variants, and you just got to read it there. And I really love these people that go up and photograph strangers and stuff. Sometimes I do it, but you got to watch as well because you don't know how people are going to react to stuff. But people are very aware now as well. Like if I shoot stuff, like they're photographing it themselves. It's the whole thing. You're pushing people out of the way to get shots sometimes. They want to take their picture, and like the first kiss, they're so jumping up, and they're like, mate, it's dark in here. You've got that thing, mate. That picture's not going to come out, and I've been paid money to take that picture, and you just jumped right in front of me. So I think that there's an interesting fact that more pictures have been taken. I don't know the exact ratio, right? But this is just like a rough idea to get you around your head. I think there's, in the last, say, 3 months, there's been more pictures taken than there was since like photography was first invented, sort of thing. Just hardly anything, and then there's been a huge spike. Like even your grannies are using the phones to take pictures now. At one time, it was just you had a cousin or something that was into photography that would take pictures, and if you bought a roll of film, I think it ended up quite large. For 35 mil, you could get 36 exposures. Now people do the 36 just to get that one picture of their selfie, So anybody going on holiday, they take tons. Before you used to take it, and you'd be lucky if 5 came out.
Yeah, and I remember those days as well. But there used to be something so exciting about
now, and it's taken away that excitement. It's like Netflix has killed movies, isn't it? Somebody says you spend more time looking for a movie than you actually do watching movies these days. You've got hundreds of thousands to choose from. You used to go to rent movies, and you'd have all the old ones, but then you go like, oh, these are the new ones. You pick 2 movies. if you're like me, as it says, you picked a horror movie to kind of take the edge off things. If you shit your pants, you had 2 movies, and you had to rewind it back, and now it's just there's too much. So it does take away that kind of. Our attention spans have been depleted. Our dopamine levels are just, receptors must be frazzled because we just always need a high. It definitely changes the species just with the digital age.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like something has been lost, but I also feel like really grateful that I grew up where, Instagram's this huge big thing and everyone feels like they have to document their life inside and out. And I just kind of feel like, thank gosh, that never happened. Like I grew up before that, really, because I wasn't, I don't know, I just wasn't so aware of myself and what I looked like. It didn't bother me. And I just worry that digital has.
I think it definitely has, and it's pushed real to real extremes. Maybe some good things as well. I think it's like anything. There's good and bad. I feel like we had a lot of magic because a lot of things were out with our control, if you like, previously. But then again, you also looked at a lot of kids knowing like smoking's stupid. Just we're smarter in some respects and dumber in others. But we've also become desensitized. I remember used to be like banned videos, right? And I remember somebody got Faces of Death, and it was people getting killed accidentally or firing squads. And I remember a couple of them really like got me like, what the? Probably not quite nightmares, but I couldn't get it off my mind because it was just so horrible to me. But there's wee kids, man, in primary school that they wouldn't even blink. Like I get sent pictures and I always joke, and I'm like, this stuff would have been banned. You'd have never got a hold of this. There's like everything, man. We've just. I don't know you. I don't know if it's a guy thing or a Scottish thing or whatever, but some of these guys send you videos, man. You're like, what? I wouldn't say that yet, man. I don't want to.
No, I get it.
You've got that mad pal that likes to shock people, and you're just like some of these things. Like, oh, I just wish I never watched that video. But it's definitely not as bad now. You're just kind of delete and it's away.
Well, that's it. Speaking about the whole sort of desensitized thing, though, I completely understand that. So my mum's a primary school teacher, and she comes in and she's horrified with like the kids that are playing video games that are like 18 plus, and they're like shooting people's heads off and things like that. And she was like, and these kids are like 7, and they're talking about the guns that they can use.
Too much time on it. That
sort of forms of attack.
Things like getting exercise or reading or getting used to spending time alone, that it's good to be bored. It's good to find stuff. And like I'd done so many cool stuff when I was young, like artistic adventures or, playing football, even because you were bored, you're going about people's doors. Like you're coming out for a game of football now, it's just, they're just sitting there and I feel like they've got that high dopamine getting pumped into them because they're playing these games that are so exciting and they just can't handle things now because everyone must be born in comparison. They're just becoming so zapped up that if they're not doing these things, they're not interested. And we see it, like I do football coach and I see some of these young boys that are just like, I always joke, I'm like, it looks as if you've done the night shift on that PlayStation. You look burst, you know what I mean?
It's true though, it's so true. Right, I feel we've gone off piste a little bit. But
I did warn you.
No, not at all. Not at all. So I'm going to swing it back to 2 of the final images that I want to talk to you about. And I don't know if they're both
both in that region,
but
specifically two different things.
The one that when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a John Lewis advert or something like that. It's like the opening scene to a John Lewis advert. It's the Glencoe snow. And it's just, oh my gosh. Like there's part of me that's like, that surely can't be real. It's just so beautiful. Thank you very much,
first of all, but that's exactly, you know why that's in there? Because that's what I would consider my personal work, right? That's when everything kind of comes together for me. Whereas, I'm out with my friend, right? That was the one that we're up 5 o'clock in the morning. We drive there. It's something I probably had never done. I was quite a lazy guy. I'm quite lazy, but really push myself to think I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I used to go to my bed at that time when I was younger, in my teens, right? So that's me getting up early, and we knew, the snow's there, we're checking weather. It didn't really, we climbed a mountain that day, not all the way up, but it was darkness, so I had a real buzz for that. We've got the head torches on. It's a wee bit sketchy. It's icy, it's snowy, you can't really see where you're going. So I'm really, the adrenaline's pumping. Kind of the sunrise fizzled out. It never really quite happened, but we were driving back. And this is the things I have dreams of, that we just looked over and I'm like, my friend, pull over, pull over. There's hardly anybody there, a couple of people, and the sun's just rising up. That's a famous location in Glasgow. It's famous because it's such a wee beautiful bothy in the foothills of Glencoe. You just say the snow's just untouched. The sun's starting to come up. I'm literally just buzzing. I feel as if I'm in like a film set or like a fantasy world. And I'm just laughing with my friend. I'm so happy because it's like these dreams. I'm just, wherever I point my camera, I'm just getting gold. I love what I got. I loved editing it. I loved the reactions from people. And that for me is just kind of what I love about photography. I love getting outside. We were cold. I get exercise. The sun was coming out. My friend was happy. We were laughing. And then when we were heading back, everybody was heading into Glencoe and it ended up packed. And we were just driving away from everybody. And I'm like, you know what? The early bird catches the worm. Everyone came together. It was like the stars aligned for me personally with photography, fresh air, everything, just everything came together. And that's why I kind of put that, because I don't know if the picture conveys how I feel so much, but that's just for me. That's a very personal thing for me.
Do you know, for me, when I look at it, there's something that I'm like, there only somewhere like Scotland could be that beautiful and that mystical, and it's just beautiful. It's just
one of
such
the
a beautiful
things that we've got in Scotland
image.
For all the
and then
shit weather or the kind of dirtiness, the gruffness. I always, and my wife says, "Stop going on," but like the alcoholism of Glasgow and Clydebank, the violence and things. Because I've stayed in other places, and there is that. But we've also got so many cool things. We spoke about how people talk. The really friendly people and the Scottish landscape. You can maybe see Switzerland and think, "Oh, the hills are nicer there." But this has just got that real. I know I've probably said that word too much. Magical thing, but maybe mythical or something. It's just, you feel the history when you go up there. That's like people, clans used to fight there centuries of years, ago, and there's just something about Scotland that when people see that stuff, like, right, okay, we're kind of world beaters when it comes to these landscapes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just think, it's just, honestly, I could look at it forever. I just think it's so perfect, and just like knowing Scotland, knowing the landscape, knowing what it's like when it snows in these places and when it's untouched. It's just, you're so right. And that sort of like the mist that's in the background as well as the sun's coming up, that it just really, I don't know, that just, very sort of Celtic, like you said, clans and history, something's running deep.
Granted a wee bit as well. You probably sense it more being taken out 100%.
Of it.
But I always laugh, like people, like, that was only, we're just about an hour away from where I live to get to a place like that. People travel over the world to come see that stuff. You know what it was, actually? I remember watching Alien. What Alien was it? Prometheus. It was the prequel to Aliens. And one of the Scots or whatever.
Okay.
Was it one of the, I can't remember the director, but basically I thought about this. So one of the opening scenes, they fly over a aerial shot of the Man of Storr in Skye, which is a real cool rock formation, and this is where this sort of alien, I think, was it the ship that they found there or map or something? So I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, Hollywood directors went, listen guys, I need somewhere so cool and out there and otherworldly. Where are we gonna find a cool place like that to shoot? And somebody's like, man, we need to go to the Isle of Skye. And I'm like, if that's guys scouring the earth looking for something cool, that's literally a 6-hour drive. And that's when I started making a point. I'm going to start visiting these places and start photographing, because it just evokes such a, I don't know what it is, I just love going to these places. Then when you go to these places, you find people traveling from Japan, South America, all over the world with their cameras, or even just to be there and to see it. And I'm like, we've got that, and we don't really appreciate it. Not until you move away that Scottish people become Scottish. You know what I mean? They thought, wearing kilts, and when we're here, we kind of hate it. and then we move away, you really appreciate these things.
100%. You know, it's so funny. Like when I moved away from Glasgow, so I left Glasgow in 2013, and I was like, I am done with it. I am never going back. I am sick of Scotland. And then it was only sort of moving away that I kind of realised being Scottish was and I do say this to folk, like I do think being Scottish is kind of like my superpower, because when I say to people, they were like, oh, where are you from? When I go Scotland, people go, oh, Scotland. And everyone, there's just this love affair that the whole world has with it. And it's an utter privilege to be Scottish. And even in London, where I'm based, people, like I've been in pubs and in restaurants, and people have like walked past me and heard me talk and be like, oh my gosh, are you Scottish? Like, and because they just want to talk to you because they love the country so much. But it took me to move away to really appreciate that. And now when I go back, and what I say to everyone is, in Scotland's amazing, 10 minutes in the car, any direction, you're in the middle of nowhere, because that's just how it is. And it's
right on your doorstep. I grew up in Clydebank, one of a housing scheme, and we were basically the last house. Sorry, the last tenement, the last house. My living room was basically the hills were just there, you know, just where our building stopped, and it was quite a grim housing estate, but
amazing.
There was like our escapism. That's where the lochs were, these abandoned bomb shelters. It was just a mad playground, and the biggest thing for me in Scotland is the hills. I love going to hills. I've always got this motto that you never come down a mountain or a hill unhappy. You maybe mump and moan and sweat and say, I don't believe I'm walking up here, going up, but every time you come down, you're just refreshed and ready to go, re-energized, ideas flowing. You just feel so good. You're ready for everything.
Yeah, I completely agree, 100%. And it's true though, and just spending time in nature. And I think, if 2020, I mean, how often have you looked forward to going to a walk? Thanks 2020. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Like there is something about spending time in these places and just having it there, and nature in itself, what an art form. It's incredible.
Obviously,
it's
people,
just,
but like nature. I'm actually reading as it says, just I use certain things, like I use Twitter for motivation and ideas and stuff. I just keep that positive, because obviously social media, you can get caught up with so many other non-positive emotions and things. Just just being human. You sometimes get jealous. You're stuck in doing something, and somebody's away on a holiday or something. You're just like, that's a kick in the nuts seeing that, or you just can't be bothered. People having meltdowns, or people with different views, and you want to argue or whatever. But it's one place I don't really associate with a lot of people. I just try and keep it very positive. And that's one of the big ones too, is like get out on that walk and reconnect with nature. Not to be a mad hippie, but it definitely works for me. And I've got a lot of friends that are getting older, and that's one thing that we can still connect. We maybe not play football or go to gigs or go drinking and stuff, but we still meet up and go for walks, maybe dogs. I bring my camera, so if somebody's into the photography or whatever, and that's just, it's a meditation for me. Me and my pal laugh, I always call it church. We're going to church.
No, I love that. Oh, I love that. Konsto, I have loved talking to you so much. Thank you for coming on and sort of banging the drum for photography.
Well, you know what? I appreciate you coming on, and even the questions you're asking was really good, and I enjoy talking about my work, obviously, but it's nice to see, how other people perceive it and what they enjoy, and I really just appreciate you having me on, and thank you very much.
No, thank you so much. Before you go, where can people find you and connect with you?
I think with the photography, the best place to go is www.bkcommercialphotography.com. That's kind of my main thing from a photography, my work, how I support my family and things, but also have a podcast where I kind of talk not just about photography, but a lot of broad things, and that's Konsto's Convos. You may have to look in the description because spelling's a wee bit different, and that's the two places. Definitely want to get back into doing more podcasts. The last one I've done was yourself, and need to push that. But the photography's been really busy and keeping me out of trouble, so needs must.
Well, perfect. And I'll leave links to the podcast and your website in the show notes below so people can find you. But thank you so much. I've loved having you on. It's been brilliant.
And there you have it, the end of another episode of the Jo's Art History podcast. Just once again, I'd like to thank Brian Konstantinou, aka Konsto, for coming on the podcast and speaking so brilliantly about his photography practice and the art of photography in general. I found this conversation really interesting, both before, during and after. It's really got me thinking about the history of photography within art history. And for anybody that's interested, I mentioned it in the podcast, but I actually put together a list of artists that use photography within their art practice. So if any of you are interested in sort of going away and learning a little bit more, here are some of the artists that I personally have come across or know just offhand who use photography within their art. Linda McCartney, Tim Walker, Donna Maar, Lee Miller, who is a fabulous female photographer. So if you haven't heard of Lee Miller, go and check her out. Mario Testino, who you might know, he is the gentleman that photographs the royal family. Actually, I mean, he does a lot of fashion photography, but he's, in sort of like 95, 96, he's the one that's responsible for all these incredible photos of Diana. And he is also the photographer that took Meghan Markle and Harry's engagement photos. Fun fact. Cindy Sherman, a fabulous female photographer. Man Ray, David Bailey, London's own. Gotta love a bit of David Bailey. Dorothea Lange. Dorothea Lange has a really incredibly famous image of an immigrant mother and her child. And they're kind of sitting on a porch together. It's one of these ones you probably know to look at, but you don't know the name of. So I would say to go check Dorothea Lange out. Dawn McCullen. Carrie Mae Weems is also an artist who, if you've never heard of her, she has an incredible series. I think it was the early 90s. She did this series called the Kitchen Table series. And just so unbelievably beautiful. Please go check them out. And then also I thought about land artists as well, thinking back to my episode on land art. Photography plays such an important role in documenting these things that were only there for a moment and helping them stand the test of time. And if you know any photographers that you think, perhaps you'd be interested to talk about or hear about, please do write in joesarthistory@gmail.com. I would love to hear your suggestions. I don't really know a horrendous amount about photography within art history, but I'm really keen to sort of sharpen up my knowledge. So if anyone out there is interested in talking to me about a photographer that is of interest to them, or just wants to suggest someone, do get in touch. You can also contact me via Instagram @joesarthistory. My DMs are always open. As always, the images that we discussed with Konsto in the show today can be viewed on my Instagram in my highlights reel. And while you're there, hey, why not give me a wee follow as well? It's always nice to show your support that way. And I write about lots of different types of art as well, not just what I talk about in the podcast. And while you were listening to my conversation with Konsto, if you thought, hey, I think I know someone that would be interested in listening to this, please do feel free to pass it on to them. Word of mouth, after all, is the best form of marketing, and it would be brilliant to get some more people involved and listening to the podcast. If you're able to, it would also mean a lot if you could leave a review to the podcast, as this helps other people find us as well. Finally, my name is Jo McLaughlin, your host and resident art historian, and thank you so much for listening. I look forward to welcoming you next time on the Jo's Art History podcast. Until then, keep learning and remember, art is for all. Bye.